Look, these Somalians have taken billions of dollars out of our country.
Weird to me is just how creepy he's been obsessed with me and the Somali community.
Are the norm, not the exception. Importing these cultures through unrestricted immigration and open borders.
What happens when a sitting member of Congress can't answer a simple question? What happens when wealth appears from nowhere? When numbers don't add up? And when the response to every question is outrage instead of evidence? Most politicians get away with it. This time, the spotlight didn't move. This is the story Washington hoped you'd forget. A story about money, power, loyalty, and the questions that still to this day don't have answers. Trump stepped in. He said what millions were already thinking. And the reaction that followed? It told you everything. Stay with us, because what we're about to break down changes how you see this entirely. Setting the stage. To understand what's happening right now, you need to go back not just a few months, but years. Because this story didn't start with a speech or a tweet. It started with patterns. Financial patterns, political patterns, patterns that investigators, donors, and now federal committees are no longer willing to ignore. On one side, you have everyday Americans, families dealing with inflation, rising rent, a grocery bill that doesn't make sense anymore, people who follow the rules, pay their taxes, and trust that the people making the laws are playing by the same set of rules. On the other side, Washington, where net worths climb, where obscure private firms suddenly balloon in value, where campaign donors and business partners sometimes overlap in ways that are difficult to explain. That contrast is what fuels the anger you're seeing right now. And it's exactly what brought this moment into focus. When Trump responded to Ilhan Omar publicly and forcefully, he wasn't just making a political move. He was giving a voice to a frustration that had been building for years in living rooms, town halls, and kitchen tables across America. The financial questions. Let's talk about the numbers. Because this is where things get serious. When any public official enters office with a negative net worth and then, within a few years, becomes linked to tens of millions in assets and business ventures, people notice. They should notice. That's not cynicism, that's accountability. The House Oversight Committee stepping in wasn't a surprise. It was the result of concerns that had quietly been building inside Washington for months, concerns that reached a level that lawmakers could no longer set aside. Public financial filings showed rapid growth. Private ventures closely connected to a political figure showed rapid growth. And financial experts, people who analyze wealth and business valuations for a living, struggled to explain how certain firms moved from obscurity to enormous apparent value in such a short period of time. That alone raises eyebrows. But then add something else into the picture. Minnesota's Feeding Our Future case, described by investigators as the largest pandemic fraud scheme in United States history. Hundreds of millions of dollars, taxpayer money that was supposed to feed children during a crisis. Several individuals connected to that operation also appeared as donors or political allies to figures in the same circle. Investigators began asking hard questions. Who knew what? When did they know it? And why didn't the alarms go off sooner? These aren't fringe conspiracy theories. These are the questions that congressional committees and federal investigators are asking right now. On the record, under oath, when multiple administrations, not just one flag, similar concerns about the same individual, something important shifts. The story is no longer about partisan attacks. It becomes about a paper trail, and paper trails don't lie. Trump speaks, and then Trump stepped into the center of it. His remarks were direct. They were pointed. And for many Americans, they were long overdue. He tied the conversation about Ilhan Omar to something larger, a national conversation about accountability, borders, loyalty, and what it actually means to hold public office in the United States. His argument drew a sharp line, a lawmaker who built a career criticizing the very country she represents, while simultaneously benefiting from its systems, its institutions, and its taxpayer dollars, draws a different kind of scrutiny. Not because criticism is wrong. Free speech is a cornerstone. But when that criticism comes from someone whose own record carries unanswered questions, patience wears thin. Trump also connected this to policy-ending taxpayer benefits for those who entered illegally, removing ineligible individuals from government benefit roles, and restoring enforcement mechanisms that had gone soft. These weren't just talking points. To his supporters, these were results, visible, concrete results. And that contrast between action and rhetoric is exactly what he was highlighting. His broader argument: leadership is defined by outcomes, not performances. When chaos replaces order, markets shake. When hesitation replaces decisiveness, adversaries notice. And when citizens feel like the rules don't apply equally to everyone, trust collapses. His message? That trust was being restored. One decision at a time. Omar's response, and what it revealed. Ilhan Omar went to CNN. She called Trump's remarks scapegoating. She called it deflection. She framed herself as a target, and her supporters rallied behind that framing immediately. That's a familiar strategy. It's well rehearsed. And on cable television, it lands well. But here's the problem. Calling criticism a distraction only works when the criticism doesn't have substance. When questions center on financial records, business relationships, donor networks, and federal investigations, labeling them as attacks doesn't make them disappear. It just changes the subject. Her CNN appearance was designed to reframe the conversation as a moral issue. Prejudice, targeting, injustice. And for her base, it worked. It energized people who see her as a symbol under attack, but skeptics noticed something else. They noticed what wasn't said. Direct answers about the finances. Direct answers about the associations. Direct clarity about the timeline. Emotion filled the space where evidence should have been. Media dynamics matter in moments like this. Friendly interviews offer narrative control. Harder forums demand specifics. Viewers notice the difference, and many of them are drawing conclusions about what that difference means. The contrast isn't subtle, and it's fueling exactly the kind of distrust that Omar herself claims to be fighting against. Step back for a moment. Because this story isn't just about one person. This is about a pattern that millions of Americans recognize. They watch officials gain wealth while families struggle. They watch institutional systems seem to protect insiders. They watch rules that apply to ordinary citizens appear to bend for the powerful. And they are done pretending they don't see it. That frustration is what gives Trump's message its traction. It's not purely about Ilhan Omar. It's about the feeling that Washington operates by a different rulebook. That accountability is something politicians talk about, but rarely face themselves. The House Oversight Committee now holds enormous weight in what comes next. They control the process. They have the subpoena power. They can follow the paper trail: financial disclosures, donor records, business valuations, legislative influence. If wrongdoing is there, it should surface. If the accusations collapse under evidence, that should become clear too. Either outcome builds more trust than silence. The coming months will define this story. Hearings will happen, reports will come out, documents will be released or not released, which will be telling in its own way. One thing is certain: the spotlight is fixed. And in Washington, a spotlight that stays on long enough eventually reveals something. At the core of all of this is a question that cuts through every political label, every party line, every talking point. Do powerful people play by the same rules as everyone else? That question doesn't belong to one party. It doesn't belong to one ideology. It belongs to every American who has ever paid a tax, followed a law, and trusted that the system would be fair. When public officials accumulate unexplained wealth while holding positions of legislative power, when fraud cases involve the same networks that surround a political figure, when responses to direct questions arrive as deflection instead of clarity, the public has every right to demand more. Voters don't want performances. They want leadership. They don't want outrage theater. They want transparency. They don't want to feel like the laws they live under are written for them but not enforced against others. That's the message resonating right now. Not just about Ilhan Omar, about Washington as a whole. Interviews fade. Headlines move on. Social media finds the next thing to rage about. But records remain. Financial disclosures remain. Donor lists remain. Business registration documents remain. Federal investigation findings remain. This story will ultimately be decided not by who makes the most emotional speech on television, but by what the documents show when investigators are done reading them. If the answers satisfy scrutiny, credibility is restored. If gaps remain unexplained, consequences follow. That's how accountability is supposed to work for every citizen and every official, regardless of party. The audience is watching. The pressure is building. And the line has been drawn. What happens next will tell you everything you need to know about whether this system still works or whether the fight to make it work again is just beginning. If this video made you think differently about what's happening in Washington right now, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. We're tracking this story as it develops. Every hearing, every document, every answer, and every silence. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. Until next time, stay informed, stay sharp, and stay watching. Sharp and stay